Welcome back, Journeyman. You're locked into episode 44, where we're diving deep into some raw realities.
Of life in Birmingham and Mobile, Alabama.
Exactly.
As depicted in the documentary, this city eats people alive.
Oh, yeah.
Powerful title, right?
It really is, and one that immediately makes you think, is this just hyperbole or a chilling reflection of the truth?
And that's exactly what we are here to unpack.
Absolutely. This documentary, it's not for the faint of heart. It's raw. It's unfiltered, and it pulls absolutely no punches in exposing the harsh realities of life in these high crime areas.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that the documentary really focuses on specific neighborhoods within these cities,
Yeah.
places where violence has tragically become an ingrained part of daily life.
Right. And for those of you who want to see the full picture, we've got the link to the original YouTube video down in the description below.
And be sure to check out the creator's channel, The Taboo Room with Aaron S.
Oh, yeah. Great content over
Need
there.
more thought-provoking content.
Yes, definitely. So let's dive in right off the bat. The documentary hits us with a statistic that's,
A stark picture.
yeah, it really is.
Birmingham, Alabama ranks #1 in most crime statistics.
That's crazy. And what's really striking is the fact that the documentary crew arrived in Birmingham after a week that saw 12 homicides.
Yeah, 12 people killed in just 1 week.
It's hard to even grasp a number like that.
It is, and it really sets the stage for the kind of relentless violence that unfolds throughout the documentary.
Oh, absolutely.
What I think makes this violence even more disturbing is that it's often driven by something the documentary refers to as hood beef.
Yeah, essentially, these are deep-seated rivalries between different neighborhoods, often fueled by personal disputes and just this kind of thirst for revenge. And it's this cycle of retaliation that becomes a central theme in this whole thing.
Yeah, one of the interviewees puts it very bluntly. He says, they do the same thing to you, so why not do it to them?
Right.
So there's this deeply ingrained belief in an eye for an eye,
Right.
which makes the possibility of peace seem almost impossible.
You know, it's interesting. At one point, the filmmaker actually suggests a truce. And the response he gets from those he's interviewing is shocking.
It is. He's met with, hell no, kill more mother cars.
It's chilling, right?
It is. It really reveals this mindset where violence is not only accepted, but almost celebrated.
It's like peace is seen as a sign of weakness, a vulnerability that they just can't afford in this environment.
You have to wonder, though, beyond these shocking acts of violence, what really struck me was the casual way that people discuss murder.
Yeah, there's this unsettling normalization of violence, almost like a detachment that's almost more disturbing than the acts themselves.
Absolutely. One interviewee even admits to enjoying watching murder videos on Instagram.
It's wild to think about, but you have to ask yourself, is this a way of coping with the trauma, or is this desensitization perpetuating the cycle of violence?
That's a really complex question, and one that the documentary doesn't shy away from.
No, it doesn't. And this normalization of violence, it's just one piece of the puzzle, one factor that contributes to this feeling of being trapped.
Trapped in a system.
Exactly. And that's where the documentary really starts to dig deep into the lives of those who feel imprisoned by their circumstances, by the environment they call home.
The documentary uses this term trenches to describe these impoverished, dangerous neighborhoods.
It's a powerful metaphor, evoking those images of confinement, being surrounded by danger from all sides. And it really speaks to that idea that your environment can really shape your destiny.
There's this recurring notion that you're always going to be a product of your environment,
Right.
highlighting how these communities feel trapped, almost predestined to a life of violence and poverty.
And one story that really brought this point home for me was this chilling account of a 4-year-old girl who was simply eating ice cream.
And bullets fly past her head?
Just imagine the trauma, the fear of a child being exposed to such violence at such a young age.
Yeah, it really underscores the constant threat these communities face and the impact that it has on the most vulnerable, the children.
Absolutely, it's heartbreaking. And it's this reality, this feeling of being trapped in this cycle of violence that we're going to explore further as we continue this deep dive.
Yeah, looking forward to it. We were just talking about the impact of, growing up in these, in the trenches and how this environment really shapes the lives of those who live there. And it's not just about witnessing the violence, but also, like you were saying, becoming almost desensitized to it.
Yeah, it's like their survival almost depends on detaching themselves from the horror that surrounds them.
Yeah.
In the documentary, there's this one interviewee who talks about watching murder videos on Instagram.
Oh, wow.
And it's chilling because it shows how constant exposure to this kind of violence can warp your sense of what's normal and what's acceptable.
And this detachment, while maybe a coping mechanism, comes at a huge cost, right? It
Mhm.
really devalues human life and perpetuates the cycle.
Absolutely. And this brings us to another crucial element. The documentary explores uh, this hood beef that fuels so much of the violence.
Mm. Yeah, these rivalries between neighborhoods are often so deeply personal, passed down through generations, fueled by grudges and thirst for revenge. And any attempt at peace is met with suspicion and hostility.
Almost like peace itself is the threat.
Exactly.
You're right. When the filmmaker suggests a truce, the response he gets is, hell no, kill more motherfuckers.
So intense.
It's a terrifying glimpse into a mindset where violence is the only solution, the only way to maintain respect and control.
And this kind of street code, this unwritten set of rules that governs life in these communities, right? It makes breaking that cycle of violence incredibly difficult.
Because showing compassion or even hesitating to retaliate is seen as weakness,
Yeah.
and in this world, vulnerability can be deadly.
Yeah, they're trapped in a system that demands violence for survival, but that very violence is destroying them from the inside out.
It's a tough reality, and this feeling of being trapped extends beyond those who are involved in these beefs. The documentary also highlights the strained relationship between these communities and law enforcement.
Yeah, there's a deep distrust of the police fueled by accusations of brutality and unfair targeting.
One of the most powerful examples of this is the story of Reggie Todd.
Yeah, a promising football player whose life was just derailed by a wrongful arrest.
Yeah, he was accused of hindering the investigation into a high school shooting, but he maintains his innocence, and while the charges were eventually dropped, he spent 3 years fighting to clear his name.
3 years where his dreams of a football career were shattered.
Exactly. His story really highlights the devastating consequences of a wrongful arrest. It's not just about being locked up, it's about the stigma, the lost opportunities, the feeling of being put on hold by a system that doesn't seem to care about your innocence.
Right, and for many in these communities, these experiences with the justice system only reinforce their distrust of authority, making them more likely to just handle things themselves outside of the law.
Which, of course, just perpetuates the cycle of violence. It's a heartbreaking paradox. They're trying to survive in a system that almost seems designed to keep them down.
It really is, and I think a documentary raises this really thought-provoking question. Can a murderer be a good person?
It's a complex question with no easy answers.
No, it really challenges us to consider the circumstances that these individuals are living in? And I don't think the documentary offers any definitive answers, but it presents a nuanced perspective.
Yeah, it suggests that morality becomes blurred in a world where survival takes precedence.
And sometimes that means doing terrible things.
Exactly. There's this belief that everybody's got their wage,
Hmm.
that everyone will eventually face consequences for their actions. It's a fatalistic view, but it also suggests a kind of moral order,
Hmm.
a belief that even in this chaotic world, there's a sense of justice.
It does make you think.
It does. And it forces us to confront this uncomfortable reality that the line between good and evil isn't always so clear-cut, especially in environments where violence is so deeply ingrained.
Right. And speaking of things that are deeply ingrained, we can't ignore the role of drill music in this whole equation.
Absolutely. Drill music, with its dark lyrics, often glorifying violence and gang culture, has become a soundtrack to these communities. And the documentary presents different perspectives on its role, some condemning it for inciting violence, others defending it as a reflection of reality.
It's like that age-old question, which came first, the
Ah.
chicken or the egg?
Mhm.
Does the violence inspire the music, or does the music inspire the violence?
It's a tough one to answer, right?
It's not a simple answer, and the relationship between music and violence is so nuanced. It's a feedback loop where they're intertwined, feeding off of each other. Drill music provides a voice to those who feel unheard, those struggling to survive in a system stacked against them. But there's also this concern that the music itself might be contributing to the very violence it reflects.
It's another layer of complexity in a situation that's already incredibly complicated.
Definitely. But while the documentary doesn't really offer any clear solutions, it does end on a note of hope, by shifting its focus to the next generation and the possibility of breaking this cycle.
There's that powerful message, urging young people to stay off the streets, focus on education, and find legitimate ways to make money.
It's a message that kind of resonates throughout the whole documentary, a desire to see the next generation escape the fate that has befallen so many in these communities.
And it's that desire for change, that glimmer of hope that we'll explore as we wrap up our deep dive, can change, truly happen, in a city that seems to devour its own. We spent a lot of time talking about the darkness, the violence, the sense of hopelessness that really pervades this documentary. But as we wrap up our deep dive, it's important to acknowledge that even in the midst of all that despair, there are these glimmers of hope.
Yeah, what really struck me was the resilience of the human spirit.
Hmm.
Even in the face of such adversity, you see these individuals and these communities fighting for better future, especially for the younger generation.
Right, there's this recurring message directed at the youth. It's a simple but profound phrase, stay on the porch.
Yeah.
And it's more than just a warning. It's a plea to avoid the pitfalls that have claimed so many of their peers.
It's about recognizing the dangers, making different choices, choosing a path that leads away from the trenches towards education and those legitimate opportunities.
And it's not just words.
No.
We see people actively trying to break the cycle, people working to clean up their neighborhoods, create safe spaces, mentor young people. They're the unsung heroes, the ones working tirelessly to bring about change from within.
Yeah, and their efforts, however small they may seem, they represent such a powerful force for good. They're planting these seeds of hope in a ground that's been scorched by violence.
Right.
And their very existence is a testament to that enduring human spirit, the belief that change is possible.
It's a powerful reminder that even in the darkest of places, hope can still flicker. And it leads us to a question that kind of lingers long after the credits roll is changed, truly possible in these communities.
The challenges are immense, those systemic issues so deeply entrenched. But the documentary also shows us the power of individual action, the impact of communities coming together to fight for something better. And their stories, their resilience, they offer that glimmer of hope, a reminder that change, however difficult, is never impossible.
So what can we as viewers, as listeners, take away from this? What can we do?
I think awareness is the first step.
Yeah.
By shining a light on these stories, by having these difficult conversations, we can start to understand the complexities of these issues.
Mm.
And understanding fosters empathy, and empathy can lead to action, to support for those working to create change.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we encourage you to keep thinking about these issues raised in this documentary. What resonated with you? What questions are still lingering in your mind?
And remember, the journey to a better world starts with each one of us stay engaged, stay informed, and stay hopeful.
Thanks for joining us for another deep dive. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more thought-provoking content. And until next time, keep seeking knowledge, keep asking questions, and keep pushing for a world where every city nourishes its people rather than eating them alive.